Hello everyone, this is 211A. Today we'll be doing a difficulty ranking of the enemies in Bopalopalous. If you haven't played it yet, Bopalopalous is a free online scratch game that I would highly recommend, link in the description. This video will contain spoilers, so please be aware of that. Before we begin, I'd like to go over how I'll be doing the ranking. Instead of just evaluating the enemies on an individual level, I'll be judging their difficulty based on how much of a threat their enemy type can pose. So, for example, the Tobi Trooper is extremely easy to defeat. However, when the screen is full of these bad boys, they can actually put up a hail of fire that's quite hard to avoid. As such, spoiler alert, they'll not place at the bottom of my list. Finally, the Maxim Quadrubot Prime will not be on this list since it's a boss and therefore poses a much bigger threat than any minion. With that out of the way though, let's jump in with the easiest enemy in Bopalopalous. If you were to take a Minecraft creeper and give it the enthusiasm of Garfield, you'd pretty much have the Tobi nuke. It places at the bottom of my list because I never actually figured out what it does. Given its name and appearance, and the way it ticks faster and faster over time, I'm assuming it blows up and kills you or something. But I'm always able to kill it before this happens. Granted, it does force you to concentrate a little on it, but even in the hardest levels I always have just enough time to deal with it even while handling the other enemies on screen. Considering I was too stupid to figure out upgrades on my first playthrough and how much you have to worry about in the later levels, the fact that it's never even activated once for me solidifies its position at the very bottom of the heap. The Helibopter is really not that scary. It flies across the screen overhead and drops high damage bombs down. However, avoiding them is as simple as sitting at the left edge of the screen, meaning that you don't really need to do anything to deal with these guys. If you were, for whatever reason, in the middle of the screen when it flew over, its bombs are still nowhere near impossible to avoid, so its potential risk is not much higher than its actual risk. Even if you do try to kill it, its health pool is no bigger than its green cousin, which we'll be getting to. It does place above the Tobi nuke because at least I've been hit by it before. If you're executing evasive maneuvers against an oncoming Shuttle Loup and a Helibopter happens to fly overhead at that exact instant, I can potentially see it being dangerous. Tobi Trooper is basically a dark version of Einstein. I saw some people speculating in the comments that they were smiling, but that's clearly a mustache. Dark Einstein is a normal grunt. They walk forward and discharge 3 beams diagonally upward. Their low HP means you can basically just mow them down in waves with just a few bursts. However, when the screen is completely clogged and when your attention is being drawn by a Tobot or something more dangerous, enough Tobi Troopers can collect at the bottom of the screen. If this happens, you could find the sky filled with more flak than you can realistically avoid. Okay, I'll just confess right here that I thought this thing was a flying pig until I got to the credits. I mean, when you do zoom in real close, you can sort of make out that it's supposed to be some kind of daredevil Einstein, but there's no way I could tell when it was flying around the screen. The Shuttle Loup flies forward, loops, and then flies straight in the direction of wherever you were at the time it completed its loop. This makes it, in almost all circumstances, a fairly easy enemy. However, when 2 or 3 Shuttle Loups are on the screen, they can force you to account for each of their trajectories. In the final battle with the Maxim Quadrubot Prime, whole flights of these bad boys are sent in your direction, posing a challenge that Tobi Trooper can't match. This is where we start getting to the enemies that are actually dangerous. When I started playing Bopalopalous, Helibopters were the enemies that I found the most annoying. They fire beads in your direction and track well enough that you feel compelled to shoot them down. They are also resilient enough to damage that they often crash into you first, making you feel compelled to avoid them. However, avoiding them means they'll live to shoot beads at you. This enemy can be a pretty vicious cycle for new players. Playing over Bopalopalous again, they clearly aren't as hard as I thought they were initially. However, they do serve as a warning that Bopalopalous isn't going to be all easy. Paraboppers can pose a significant and serious threat, supposing you aren't able to kill the Hindenbop, which we'll get to. If enough of these guys accumulate, the amount of fire they put onto the screen can be phenomenal. They also have the same HP as the physically larger Tobi Trooper. Like Tobi Troopers, Earth Scorchers can start accumulating at the bottom of the screen if you allow them to. Or if you don't, because these chunky boys have the 4th highest HP in the game. And you often find yourself trying to deal with Hindenbops or Tobots first. So they build up at the screen easier than Tobis, and the threat they pose is also far greater. Earth Scorchers lob fire coconuts at the player, which do significant damage if they hit. Even if they don't, they create an Old Faithful shaped like Jimmy Neutron's hair, which deals massive damage if you fly into it. On top of that, they're super unpredictable. Sometimes they'll launch their coconut straight at you. Other times they just try to make the Old Faithful. To be perfectly honest, I don't understand these things at all, and therefore don't have any good advice. I have dug around in the game's files and determined that the best explanation for the Hindenbop is that Baymax was launched at Mach 2.5 into Einstein's rear end. I know that's not funny, but since 50% of this game's antagonists are dark version of Einstein, I'll keep recycling that as long as I make Bopalopalous content. As deadly as Earth Scorchers are, they'd be less of a problem without Hindenbops. These giant ships float high above the city and release parabombers. Due to the fact that they have the highest HP of any non-boss enemy in the entire game, and the fact that they don't directly attack the player, it's easy to start ignoring them. However, they can quickly make a situation unsalvageable. A curtain of paraboppers in the air, combined with a Bastille Day parade of Earth Scorchers and Tobi Troopers on the ground, and Helibopters zooming everywhere, is what makes the later levels challenging. The best advice I can give is to learn how to balance which enemies you focus on. Grind down the Hindenbop's HP. You know those people who own like 50 cats? Well, one day one of them decided to repurpose Eve from WALL-E to entertain their cats. So they attached a laser to her arm. The only problem was that there were too many cats in a too small space. The solution was to create this imp which slows down objects passing through it. That way the cats could chase the laser but could be easily kept away from it. This seemed like a great idea, but in actuality it just made the cats frustrated, so Tobot was tossed away, depressed and seeking revenge against this cruel world. And also, everyone saw this placement coming. Tobot is by far the most annoying enemy in the entire Bopalopalous, and almost feels like a mini-boss. These things will spam annoying laser attacks, forcing the player to move up and down the screen to avoid them. However, if you end up going towards the top of the screen and the Tobot fires its laser, you might go down into the laser, and there goes like a quarter of your health. If that weren't bad enough, Tobots fire EMPs. Their EMPs take up like a sixth of the screen. They track super well, they often lie in the path of your escape route from the lasers, they drain your ammo, and they make your aircraft as aerodynamically capable as a Cessna 172 flying through a sky made out of peanut butter. This makes you easy prey for the lasers. The Tobot is the nightmare enemy of Bopalopalous. It took me more than 30 minutes to complete its level. The worst part is, since you are forced to prioritize Tobot over all other enemies, some of the other enemies can build up significantly on the screen. This alone can cause foes that are easy under normal circumstances to become deadly. This can include Tobi Troopers and even, I've heard from other people, Tobi nukes. Well everyone, I hope you enjoyed my ranking. Tell me what you think in the comments. Also, I recommend you check out Bopalopalous for yourself if you haven't already, but if you haven't, then why are you even watching this video? It's one of the few games on Scratch that warrants a video about gameplay instead of just a review. Either way, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, which I should probably say will be a while, but hopefully a shorter while. I am planning to return to Scratch Mario content with Duck Goose 9254's Super Mario and Scratch series. But there's no telling when these next videos will come out. YouTube is just one of my many commitments, as evidenced by the fact that after a total of 5 years, I still suck. However, I know people enjoy my Scratch-related content, considering there aren't a whole lot of other people out here to do this. So with all that said, I'll try to be more consistent with my uploads in the future, even though that isn't really setting the bar super high. Okay, I'm really done this time.